Across every corner of human history, there are mysteries that even time has failed to erase. Today, we will travel through tales that whisper from the depths of the unexplained, from what still has no answer. Get ready for a fascinating journey that invites you to dream, to wonder, and to be carried away by the unknown. The Lost Ark. The Ark of the Covenant has remained for centuries one of the most mysterious and powerful objects in the collective memory of humanity. It is said to have been created under the direct instructions of God for the people of Israel during their journey through the Sinai Desert, containing the stone tablets of the Ten Commandments, a golden vessel of heavenly manna, and the staff of Aaron, which blossomed as a sign of divine favor. Yet beyond its sacred contents, the Ark was regarded as the tangible manifestation of the divine presence among men, an object not only revered but also feared, capable of granting victory or bringing devastation. Built from acacia wood and entirely overlaid with pure gold, guarded by finely crafted cherubim, the Ark was far more than a religious symbol. It was a force unto itself. The ancient accounts tell of it parting rivers, toppling walls like those of Jericho, and routing armies. Transporting it was no ordinary task. Only consecrated Levites were permitted to approach it, and even they were required to follow strict purification rituals. Any mistake, any act of defiance could result in immediate death, as in the case of Uzzah, who according to the Chronicles died instantly when he touched the Ark to prevent it from falling. The story of the Ark of the Covenant intertwines with the most intense moments of Israelite history. Under Joshua's leadership, its presence seemed to guarantee divine intervention. Later, King David brought it to Jerusalem in a triumphant procession filled with music, dance, and offerings. Finally, under the reign of Solomon, the Ark found its resting place in the Holy of Holies of the Temple, the most sacred area of the structure, into which only the high priest could enter once a year, on the Day of Atonement. Yet, like so many wonders of the past, the Ark disappeared. When Jerusalem fell to the Babylonian armies in the 6th century before Christ, the temple was plundered, but there is no record of the Ark among the seized treasures. No mention of its destruction exists, nor any detailed account of its removal. It simply vanished from official narratives, leaving a gap that history has never been able to fill. Since then, its fate has become one of the greatest mysteries of antiquity. Various theories have arisen attempting to explain its destiny. Some believe that the priests, aware of the impending danger, hid the Ark before the invasion, perhaps in a nearby cave or a remote sanctuary. Others argue that it was carried to Mount Nebo, where Moses had his final vision of the Promised Land. A persistent Ethiopian tradition claims that the Ark was transported to the kingdom of Aksum, where it is said to remain to this day, hidden from public view in a small chapel, guarded perpetually by a single monk who may never abandon his post. In more recent times, bolder hypotheses have captured the imagination. Some researchers, blending history and legend, suggest that the Knights Templar might have found the Ark during the Crusades and brought it back to Europe, where it was hidden to protect its power. Others venture even further, proposing that the Ark was not merely a religious artifact but a technological device of unknown, perhaps extraterrestrial origin, capable of generating energy fields, manipulating matter, or opening gateways to other dimensions. Regardless of its true nature, the Ark of the Covenant has never ceased to captivate the human imagination. It appears in novels, films, series, and video games, and with each new generation, the central question is revived. Where is the Ark? Does it still exist, hidden away in some forgotten corner of the earth? Or is it merely a myth, a tale so deeply rooted in human history that it has become a truth beyond the tangible? Beyond its physical existence, the Ark symbolizes something far more profound. It stands as a testament to humanity's eternal longing for the absolute, for a direct connection with the divine, for a certainty that transcends the fleeting nature of existence. It matters little how many civilizations have risen and fallen since then. The idea of an object embodying the power of God continues to echo in our collective subconscious, a call to the sacred, to the eternal. Each search for the Ark, each lost expedition into the deserts, each page written about it is not merely an attempt to find a lost artifact but an expression of a deeper yearning. The hope that beyond the visible world, there exists a hidden order, that we are part of a greater design that we can barely glimpse. In this sense, the Ark is a mirror reflecting our own desire for meaning, for faith, for connection. Perhaps we will never know whether the Ark truly rests beneath the sands of the desert, hidden in a remote monastery, or buried beneath the foundations of some modern city. Perhaps it is only a myth, a legend woven from the threads of faith and hope. Yet it is precisely in the mystery that surrounds it, in the impossibility of uncovering its final fate, that its true power lies. The Ark lives on, not as an object of gold and wood, but as a living flame within the heart of humanity, reminding us that certain dreams endure beyond time. In every generation that wonders about its whereabouts, in every historian who scrutinizes the ancient texts, in every traveler who seeks its traces, the Ark beats again, silent yet unyielding, like a secret promise that not all stories have been told, that not all mysteries have been solved. Thus, the story of the Ark of the Covenant continues, not carved in stone, but alive in the memory of those who search, who question, and who dream. The Spear of Destiny. Among the objects where history and legend intertwine so completely that reality and myth become almost indistinguishable, few possess an aura as dense with mystery, ambition, and tragedy as the Spear of Destiny. It is said to have been the weapon that pierced the side of Jesus Christ as he hung upon the cross. A simple iron shaft that, touched by the act of ultimate sacrifice, absorbed a power beyond all human comprehension. From that moment forward, it became not merely a relic of faith but a talisman of absolute power, coveted by emperors, conquerors, and visionaries who saw within it the key to command the world. The first documented appearance of the spear dates back to the early centuries of Christianity, found in texts that blend gospel accounts with oral traditions. Yet its figure grew during the later Roman Empire, when chroniclers claimed that Constantine the Great, the first Christian emperor, had possessed it, and that with it he secured his victory at the Battle of the Milvian Bridge, altering forever the destiny of Europe. From then on, the spear ceased to be merely a religious remembrance. It became a symbol of imperial legitimacy, an object whose possession granted divine right over nations. Over the centuries, the Spear of Destiny passed through the hands of powerful rulers, always wrapped in an aura of fear and reverence. It was said that Charlemagne, the architect of the Carolingian Renaissance and unifier of vast lands under the banner of the Holy Roman Empire, carried the spear into every battle and that he was never defeated while it remained in his possession. Legend claimed he would die once he lost it, and thus, after his death, the spear took on a near-ritual significance, a sacred object without which no sovereign felt truly crowned. Yet, like all objects of great power in human tradition, the spear also carried a silent curse, a shadow that seemed to fall over those who coveted or sought to wield it. Kings and emperors who seized it fell one after another, victims of intrigue, betrayal, or sudden defeat. History seemed to whisper that such power could never be claimed without consequence, that its acquisition carried a price that none could escape. During the Middle Ages, in the time of crusades and heresies, the spear multiplied in stories and manifestations. In Antioch, during the First Crusade, a monk named Peter Bartholomew claimed to have visions in which the Apostle Andrew revealed the true location of the spear, buried beneath the Cathedral of St. Peter. The discovery, made amid accusations of fraud and intense skepticism, revitalized the Crusaders at a critical moment. Yet even then, the authenticity of the relic remained in dispute, and soon multiple cities across Europe claimed to possess the true Holy Lance, each with its own lineage of miracles and tragedies. The confusion, far from weakening the myth, only strengthened it. In Vienna, the so-called Holy Lance was guarded as an imperial treasure, while elsewhere copies and fragments emerged, each bearing its own weight of legend. The spear ceased to be a single object. It became an idea, a concept of concentrated power, a symbol that did not need historical proof to command fascination. However, the story of the Spear of Destiny took a darker turn in the 20th century, when one of history's darkest figures, Adolf Hitler, became obsessed with its legend. In his youth in Vienna, Hitler is said to have seen the spear displayed in the Hofburg Museum, among other relics of the Holy Roman Empire. It is told that in that silent moment, he conceived the belief that whoever possessed the spear would control the fate of the world. Later, after rising to power, Hitler ordered the seizure of the spear following the annexation of Austria and had it transported to Nuremberg, convinced that it secured his own destiny. The tragic irony soon unfolded. On the very day that American forces captured Nuremberg and recovered the spear, Hitler took his own life in his Berlin bunker. Thus, the cycle repeated, as if the spear itself turned against those who sought to wield it without truly understanding its burden. Today, the lance exhibited in Vienna remains a subject of debate and analysis. Modern investigations suggest that the artifact may have been crafted several centuries after the time of Christ, making its direct link to the crucifixion historically unlikely. Yet myth endures where facts falter. In the end, the story of the Spear of Destiny speaks less about a weapon or relic than it does about humanity's inexhaustible thirst for a power that transcends mere existence. In every emperor who held it, in every crusader who searched for it, in every historian poring over ancient manuscripts, the same restless longing beats. The search for something greater, for a touch of the eternal. The spear was the promise of ultimate control, the temptation to bend the world to one's will, but also the warning that such ambitions are always bought at terrible cost. And so the Spear of Destiny continues its silent passage through time, hidden behind museum glass, between the pages of forgotten chronicles, in the whispers of those who still believe in its power. More than a relic, it is a reflection of human obsession. The hope that objects can house power, the belief that destiny can be seized and shaped, and the inevitable tragedy when symbols of faith are mistaken for instruments of conquest. In the trail the spear has left across history, the silhouette of a humanity emerges that has never ceased its search for meaning, for certainty, for proof that its will could reshape the very workings of the universe. Thus, the Spear of Destiny remains, no longer lodged in the side of a martyr, but floating in the eternal memory of humanity, suspended between promised glory and inevitable downfall. The search for the crystal skulls. Among the haunting echoes left to us by the past, few objects inspire as much wonder and speculation as the enigmatic crystal skulls, masterfully crafted pieces that seem to defy not only the limits of ancient craftsmanship but also the boundaries of time and human understanding. Since their appearance in private collections and museums during the 19th century, these figures have captivated archaeologists, mystics, and adventurers alike, fueling a relentless search that crosses centuries and continents. The first reports of the crystal skulls emerged during the European explorations of Central America, when interest in pre-Columbian civilizations mingled with a fervent romanticism for the exotic and the unknown. These skulls, carved from pure quartz, were believed not merely to be relics of the Maya or Aztecs, but remnants of an even older, more advanced civilization, whose traces lingered among the ruins and legends of indigenous peoples. One of the most famous examples is the Mitchell Hedges skull, attributed to the British explorer Frederick Albert Mitchell Hedges, who claimed to have discovered it in 1924 among the ruins of Lebanton in Belize. The piece, sculpted with astonishing precision, reproduces the human skull's anatomy with a perfection seemingly unattainable by the tools available in the pre-Columbian era. Carved from a single block of pure quartz, featuring articulated jaws and surfaces so smooth they refract light in complex ways, the craftsmanship challenges even modern technology. Following this discovery, a silent fever spread among the archaeological community and esoteric circles alike. Other skulls began to appear in museums and private collections, each one shrouded in an impenetrable aura of mystery, each one posing the same essential questions about their origin, purpose, and meaning. Paris, London, Washington, great cities of knowledge displayed these relics like trophies of the inexplicable, fragments of a past that seemed to elude logical history. Mayan legends, reinterpreted and expanded by Western imagination, soon wrapped the skulls in even thicker layers of myth. It was said there were 13 original skulls, scattered across the world, and that when reunited, they would reveal vital secrets essential to humanity's survival. Some spoke of healing powers, others of communication with other dimensions, or access to vast reserves of ancient wisdom. To certain mystical groups, the skulls were not mere artifacts, but living vessels of consciousness, repositories of universal memories older than any known civilization. Yet as science advanced, the initial fascination collided with the relentless skepticism of critical analysis. Studies carried out during the second half of the 20th century, particularly microscopic examinations and magnetic resonance imaging, revealed that many of the skulls bore marks of rotary tools and abrasives unavailable before the 19th century. For many experts, this placed their creation squarely in the period of European Romantic archaeological fervor, a time hungry for marvels, when the line between discovery and invention often blurred. Institutions like the British Museum and the Smithsonian, custodians of some of these emblematic pieces, published reports suggesting that the skulls were most likely produced in Europe, possibly in Germany, where the art of quartz crystal carving had reached remarkable refinement. The notion that they were authentic relics of the Maya or Aztecs began to collapse under the weight of material evidence. Yet, as with so many enduring myths, scientific demystification proved insufficient to extinguish the flame of fascination. On the contrary, the possibility that the skulls were modern creations only redirected the focus toward deeper questions about the nature of myth itself, about humanity's unquenchable need to craft objects that transcend the linear narrative of history and open windows to realities beyond measurement. In this sense, the crystal skulls occupy a unique place among the great cultural enigmas of humanity. It matters little whether they were carved by pre-Columbian artisans or European craftsmen of the 19th century. What matters is the symbolic space they have conquered in our collective imagination. They are mirrors of our tireless yearning to find traces of lost knowledge, to believe in messages from a time when wisdom and cosmos were still perceived as one. The skulls have become protagonists in books, films, documentaries, and countless fictional tales that have elevated them to the status of universal symbols. Their image, unmistakable and enigmatic, represents both forgotten wisdom and a warning about the limits of human understanding. In their cold crystal surfaces, some see a reflection of the human soul, complex, fragile, resilient, and forever thirsty for answers that perhaps will never fully come. The journey of the crystal skulls, from dusty cabinets of curiosity to their enthronement in contemporary popular culture, reveals much about our relationship with mystery. Despite all our scientific and technological advances, we continue to crave those spaces of the inexplicable, those pockets within reason's tapestry where wonder and faith can still grow freely. Perhaps, in the end, what most moves us about the search for the crystal skulls is not the hope of finding definitive answers but the very experience of seeking. In every failed expedition, every disproven hypothesis, every tale blending truth and fantasy, the ancient heartbeat of human adventure pulses. The same heartbeat that once drove the first explorers into unknown jungles and the ancient sages to scan the heavens for signs. Whether authentic relics or modern fabrications, the crystal skulls accompany us as reminders of that essential dimension of our nature. The endless drive to reach beyond the known, to look past imposed horizons, to believe that somewhere, in a hidden corner of the world, a secret capable of changing everything still awaits discovery. Thus they continue their silent journey through the centuries, illuminated by the dreams of those who refuse to believe that all the mysteries of the world have already been solved. The search for the Book of Spells. In the shadows cast by forgotten civilizations, in the dusty corridors of monasteries consumed by time, in the whispers passed down through generations, there lives the enduring human obsession with the forbidden knowledge, the kind that promises to open doors sealed shut by ignorance and fear. Among all the objects pursued across centuries, none gleams more brightly than the mythical Book of Spells, a supreme grimoire said to contain not merely magical formulas but the very keys to altering the immutable laws of nature. Since ancient times, humanity has felt compelled to preserve its hidden knowledge in secret writings, codices filled with rites, invocations, and mysteries meant for those who dared to see beyond the common understanding. Egypt, Babylon, and Greece all left behind traces of magical texts, invocations to forgotten gods, recipes for alchemical transformations, and spells designed to shield the soul or command the forces of the invisible. Yet as institutionalized religions and authoritarian empires asserted control, these writings became targets of suppression, first driven underground, then burned or lost to the relentless passage of time. It is within this context that the legend of the Book of Thoth was born, attributed to the Egyptian god of wisdom and said to contain all the secrets of the universe, the mysteries of heaven and earth, the language of animals, the laws of the stars, and the means to direct the destinies of men. According to the oldest traditions, whoever read the sacred words inscribed within would gain unimaginable power, but would also suffer terrible punishment for disrupting the natural order. The eternal paradox. Knowledge as both key and trap, both promise and doom. Throughout the centuries, seekers of mysteries, alchemists, occult scholars, and visionaries have embarked on the impossible quest to find this primordial volume. Frequently confused with other magical texts, the Book of Thoth inspired medieval grimoires that attempted to compile spells, invocations, and esoteric teachings. The Picatrix, the Liber Juratus, the Ars Notoria. Each promised, between cryptic symbols and hermetic diagrams, to contain echoes of the lost wisdom. From the shadow of these manuscripts emerged the myth of the Necronomicon, the fictional tome created by H.P. Lovecraft in the 20th century. Though born from literature and horror, the Necronomicon entered the collective imagination so powerfully that many came to believe in its real existence. A book penned by a mad Arab that could summon ancient terrors and break the seals protecting humanity from unspeakable forces. Even though fictional, the Necronomicon captured the eternal longing for texts that reveal not just forbidden truths but truths perhaps too immense for the human mind to endure. Outside of literary invention, the real world knew its share of forbidden and cursed books. During the Middle Ages, an age flourishing with alchemy, astrology, and secret sciences, countless manuscripts appeared, recording techniques for transmutation, rituals for summoning angelic or demonic beings, methods for attaining supernatural power. The Inquisition hunted down these works with unrelenting ferocity. Many were confiscated, burned, or locked away in the secret archives of the Church. Yet the flames never fully erased the memory. Fragments survived, partial copies, encrypted versions of ancient grimoires, hidden in forgotten libraries, private collections, and in manuscripts that, though battered by the centuries, refused to be completely lost. The search for the Book of Spells, therefore, was never solely the pursuit of a tangible artifact but a battle against oblivion, an attempt to reconstruct from ruins and shards the map of a once complete knowledge. In more recent times, archaeology, philology, and religious history have unearthed texts that, though fragmented, resemble the ancient grimoires, the Corpus Hermeticum, the Greek magical papyri, the Coptic manuscripts of Nag Hammadi. Within these, we glimpse the echoes of a humanity that did not distinguish between religion, science, and magic. A world where knowing the name of a star or performing a sacred rite could open unimaginable doors. The contemporary fascination with these lost books has not diminished. If anything, it has grown. In an era that proudly proclaims itself rational and scientific, the allure of ancient grimoires persists, perhaps fueled by a yearning for the sacred, by an intuition that behind the certainties of modernity, an ancient mystery still slumbers. Books like the Codex Gigas, the so-called Devil's Bible, and the Voynich Manuscript, written in an unknown language and filled with impossible illustrations, continue to kindle the hope that a thread to the heart of the enigma remains within reach. Thus, the search for the Book of Spells is not merely a physical expedition but a profound reflection on our relationship with knowledge and power. Each attempt to find its trace poses the silent question: what would we do if we found it? Would we resist the temptation to wield it, to play at being gods, to bend the delicate balance of the world to our will? Perhaps it is for this very reason that the book remains hidden, cloaked within the folds of old stories, within the cracks of forbidden libraries, within the murmured legends of those who dared to brush against its contents and paid the ultimate price. For the true power of the Book of Spells lies not so much in its material existence but in its capacity to challenge our ambition, to confront our thirst for the absolute, to test our desire to cross the fragile boundary between the possible and the impossible. Generation after generation, humanity continues to search, not only among ancient manuscripts and lost codices but also within itself, within the deepest recesses of the human spirit, within the eternal dream that somewhere, hidden beyond sight, a wisdom long forgotten might still be waiting to be rediscovered. And as long as there are those who wonder, who dream, who dare to look beyond the veil of the obvious, the Book of Spells will continue to write itself, line by invisible line, in the boundless manuscript of human longing. The Voynich Manuscript. Among the countless mysteries that have challenged human intellect, few appear as enigmatic as provocative, and at the same time as stubbornly impenetrable as the Voynich Manuscript, that singular book that, ever since its discovery, has fascinated cryptographers, linguists, historians, and dreamers alike, seducing them with the promise of hidden knowledge that century after century refuses, with a kind of stubborn pride, to reveal itself. Written in an alphabet that matches no known language, filled with illustrations depicting non-existent plants, impossible constellations, and women immersed in rites of unfathomable meaning, the manuscript stands as a silent monument to the persistence of mystery in an age that prides itself on having explained nearly everything. Its documented story begins in 1912, when Wilfred Voynich, a Polish antiquarian living in New York, acquired the manuscript among forgotten holdings at Villa Mondragone near Rome, an ancient Jesuit college where precious documents had accumulated over centuries of quiet scholarship. From the first glance, Voynich realized he had found something extraordinary. Its pages, made of high-quality vellum, were densely filled with fluid, elegant handwriting, systematic enough to suggest a real language, yet none known to history. There was no translation, no cipher key, no reference point from which to unlock it. Soon, the manuscript attracted some of the greatest cryptographic minds of the early 20th century, including experts who had broken military codes during the two world wars. Yet none could crack its secrets. Every attempt to decipher it revealed only further complexity. Repetitive structures, patterns that hinted at an underlying grammar, but no decisive breakthrough to understanding. The manuscript comprises around 240 pages, divided into thematic sections that, interpreted only through their strange illustrations, offer no certainties about their true purpose. The first section appears to be a herbal compendium, filled with depictions of plants that resemble no known species, as if drawn from a parallel world, familiar in structure yet alien in every detail. Then follows an astronomical section, displaying zodiacal circles, celestial diagrams, and star charts that do not perfectly match the constellations of our sky, as if reflecting a lost celestial cartography. A biological section comes next, where naked women bathe in networks of intertwined tubes, landscapes suggesting anatomy as much as alchemy. Finally, there are diagrams of a pharmacological appearance, and pages of continuous text that might represent recipes or treatises, though their meaning remains inaccessible. Radiocarbon dating performed in 2011 placed the vellum's creation between 1404 and 1438, anchoring it firmly in the early 15th century. Yet this chronological certainty shed little light on the identity of its author or the manuscript's true purpose. Across decades, names have been proposed: Roger Bacon, the 13th century Franciscan scholar; John Dee, the Elizabethan mathematician and occultist; or Jacobus Sinapius, a botanist at the court of Emperor Rudolph II of Bohemia, one of the earliest known owners of the book. Theories about the manuscript's nature could hardly be more contradictory. Some see it as an elaborate hoax, a medieval forgery designed to impress a credulous patron, a meaningless text intended to appear valuable solely because of the mystery it exudes. Others argue it is a genuine scientific document, encrypted in a code yet to be broken, preserving lost knowledge about medicinal plants, astrology, or ritual practices unknown to mainstream history. Some have even proposed that it represents a form of glossolalia, spontaneous ecstatic writing born from altered states of consciousness, a reflection of a mind striving to express realities beyond conventional language. Throughout the 20th and 21st centuries, the most advanced techniques of computational linguistics, statistical analysis, and artificial intelligence have been applied to the manuscript. Although certain patterns suggest the text obeys linguistic principles rather than randomness, no convincing translation has emerged. Every attempt at decipherment seems only to deepen the enigma, as if the manuscript itself were defending its ancient silence against the probing mind of humanity. Beyond its literal content, the Voynich manuscript has come to embody, in the collective imagination, the very essence of the unresolved mystery, a final frontier where human knowledge falters, where logic and science, however sophisticated, must bow before the sheer existence of something radically other. In a world flooded with instantaneous information, quick answers, and superficial certainties, the manuscript stands as a stubborn monument to the enduring power of the unanswered question. To contemplate its pages is to confront our own limits, to face the fragility of understanding, to practice the humility of admitting that not everything is meant to be categorized, measured, or explained. Perhaps therein lies its greatest value, The Voynich Manuscript exists not to yield its secrets but to remind us that some mysteries must be honored precisely because they resist solution. Thus, generation after generation, scholars, lovers of knowledge, restless minds immerse themselves in its maze of symbols, chasing the silent promise that perhaps, someday, a different intelligence, a new sensitivity, will glimpse its meaning. Or perhaps not, and the manuscript will remain forever a mirror, one in which we see reflected not the hidden language of an ancient world, but the undying human thirst for meaning beyond reach. Meanwhile, it rests quietly in the archives of Yale University, under the gaze of those who still believe that some books were never written to be read, but to be sought. The Curse of Tutankhamun. When Howard Carter, under the blazing Egyptian sun of November 1922, brushed away the last layer of rubble and peered through a small hole into the hidden treasures of an untouched tomb, he could hardly have imagined that alongside the riches of a forgotten pharaoh, he would also unleash one of the most persistent and fascinating legends of the modern age, the Curse of Tutankhamun, a story woven from sudden death, superstition, mystery, and that eternal human fascination with what lies buried beneath the sands of time. Tutankhamun's tomb, sealed for more than 3,000 years, was a miracle of preservation and a dream for any archaeologist. Chambers filled with sumptuous objects, golden thrones, war chariots, chests brimming with jewels, guardian statues, and at its deepest heart, the sarcophagus containing the young king's mummy. It was undoubtedly the most significant archaeological discovery of its time, perhaps of any time. Yet alongside the wonder came fear. A barely visible inscription, marked near the entrance of the tomb, warned that death would come to those who disturbed the king's rest. In the weeks and months following the opening, strange events began to accumulate. Lord Carnarvon, the British aristocrat who had financed the excavation, died suddenly in April 1923, just 5 months after the discovery. A mosquito bite, infected after a small cut, developed into a fatal blood infection. According to numerous reports, at the very moment of his death, the lights of Cairo mysteriously went out, as if some invisible force were claiming its due. In England, it was said, Carnarvon's dog howled pitifully and dropped dead without warning. Carnarvon's death was only the beginning. Over the following years, several members of the excavation team, as well as visitors connected to the tomb, died under mysterious circumstances. Sudden infections, inexplicable illnesses, tragic accidents. The sensationalist press, always eager for exotic and chilling tales, quickly embraced the idea of a pharaoh's curse, an ancient retribution unleashed upon those who dared to violate the sacred secrets of the Valley of the Kings. The legend grew unstoppably. It was said that Carter himself had discovered ritual objects intended to protect the tomb, and that certain seals clearly warned of divine vengeance. Some journalists claimed to have suffered visions and nightmares after visiting the site. Others, more imaginative still, asserted that invisible forces guarded the treasures, ready to punish those whose hearts were tainted by greed. As the list of deaths lengthened, the notion of a dark force associated with the tomb became entrenched in the popular imagination. It mattered little that many of the principal archaeologists, including Carter himself, lived on for decades after the excavation. The story had already taken root where facts rarely have the power to dislodge a good legend. Over time, rational explanations emerged to attempt to dismantle the myth. Some scientists proposed that the long-sealed tomb might have harbored dangerous bacteria, toxic molds, or poisonous gases released upon opening. In particular, the fungus Aspergillus flavus was mentioned, capable of producing deadly mycotoxins under certain conditions. Yet, however plausible these theories might have been, they never managed to captivate the public mind in the way the vision of an enraged pharaoh exacting his revenge from beyond the grave did. The Curse of Tutankhamun touches something deep within human nature. The ancient fear of violating the sacred, the intuition that some secrets, once uncovered, carry with them not only knowledge but an unbearable price. From Greek tragedies to medieval legends, tales of those who dared to see too much and paid for it are constant. Thus, Tutankhamun's tomb became not merely an archaeological discovery, but a portal into that dark and fascinating space where curiosity and punishment intertwine. Ironically, Tutankhamun himself was a relatively insignificant figure in the grand tapestry of Egyptian history. A boy king who ascended the throne at 9 years old and died at 19, during turbulent and unstable times. Without the discovery of his tomb, he might have remained a mere footnote in the chronicles of ancient Egypt. Instead, thanks to the find, and even more so thanks to the legend of the curse, his name became synonymous with the lost splendor of Egypt, with the inscrutable mystery of the pyramids, with the eternal promise of the unknown. The curse, whether real or imagined, played a crucial role in reviving global interest in ancient Egypt. Traveling exhibitions of Tutankhamun's treasures in the latter half of the 20th century attracted millions of visitors around the world. Films, novels, documentaries, and television series replicated and reimagined the myth, to the point where for many the word pharaoh evokes not the complexity of Egyptian history, but the image of the cursed tomb. Perhaps the true legacy of Tutankhamun's curse is not found in the string of deaths, nor in the scientific theories of fungal spores, but rather in the unspoken warning it leaves behind, that humanity, no matter how confident in its science and its knowledge, will never fully tame the power of mystery. There will always be places where the sacred and the forbidden intertwine, where crossing a threshold means more than a physical act. It becomes a transgression against an invisible balance that, once disturbed, demands a price. Thus, beneath the eternal sands of the Valley of the Kings, amidst crumbling temples and fallen columns, the shadow of Tutankhamun continues to watch, not as a vengeful ghost, but as a silent reminder that some doors, once opened, can never be fully closed again, and that the price of curiosity is sometimes not measured in gold or fame, but in the restless uncertainty that lingers in the hearts of those who once dared to peer too deeply into the abyss of time. The lost city of Atlantis. When Plato, in the 4th century before Christ, first spoke of a majestic island located beyond the Pillars of Hercules, rich in resources and splendor, inhabited by a powerful and advanced civilization that, in an act of hubris, defied the gods and was destroyed in a single day and night of misfortune. He could not have foreseen that his tale would ignite a flame that, across the centuries, would continue to burn brightly in the hearts of those who dream of sunken cities, lost continents, and forgotten wisdom buried beneath the weight of the ocean. Atlantis became more than just a name. It became a promise of discovery, a metaphor for greatness and downfall, a mirror in which humanity reflects its deepest hopes and fears. Plato presents the story of Atlantis in 2 of his dialogues, Timaeus and Critias, where he recounts how Egyptian priests told Solon, the Athenian lawmaker, of the existence of this island, larger than Libya and Asia combined, an empire that dominated lands beyond its native shores, until the arrogance and corruption of its inhabitants provoked divine wrath and led to its annihilation. Plato himself seems to waver between presenting the account as historical fact and as a moral allegory, a contrast in which Athens, the ideal city of his philosophy, triumphs over the decadent Atlantis, embodying the values of moderation and virtue over corruption. The uncertainty of Plato's intentions has not prevented entire generations from taking his story literally. From antiquity to the present day, explorers, cartographers, archaeologists, and dreamers have sought the lost city, attempting to find, in the depths of the seas or the forgotten expanses of the earth, the ruins of a civilization whose fall nonetheless left an indelible mark on the human imagination. Countless locations have been proposed for Atlantis. In the Mediterranean, off the coasts of Spain, on the island of Santorini, which was devastated by a catastrophic volcanic eruption in the 2nd millennium before Christ. In the Caribbean, among the Bahamas, where some believe the Bimini Road to be remnants of Atlantean streets. Even in Antarctica, now covered in ice but perhaps once, according to certain theories, a fertile and habitable land. Each hypothesis, each new expedition, adds new layers to the legend, feeding the hope that somewhere, in a forgotten corner of the planet, the stones of Atlantis still await discovery. Yet beyond any physical existence, Atlantis lives in a symbolic space, as the embodiment of humanity's yearning for better, wiser, and more just civilizations, and simultaneously, as a warning of the arrogance and fragility inherent in all human endeavor. In Atlantis, we see the culmination of our longing for a lost golden age, a time when humans and gods supposedly lived in harmony before the inevitable fall. But it also serves as a reminder that progress without virtue leads inexorably to ruin. The influence of Atlantis on Western culture is profound and ubiquitous. During the Renaissance, when the rediscovery of classical texts rekindled interest in ancient wisdom, the idea of Atlantis inspired philosophical treatises, speculative maps, and utopian narratives. Francis Bacon, in his New Atlantis, envisioned a society of enlightened scientists, heirs to the lost knowledge of Atlantis. Other writers, like Thomas More, echoed that nostalgia in their visions of ordered, virtuous societies, standing in stark contrast to the corruption of their own times. In more recent centuries, Atlantis became a central symbol within esoteric and pseudoscientific traditions. To occultists like Helena Blavatsky and Edgar Cayce, Atlantis was not merely a sunken city but the original cradle of humanity, a civilization that possessed technological and spiritual knowledge far beyond our own. In their visions, the Atlanteans mastered crystal energy, anti-gravity, telepathy, knowledge that, after the catastrophe, was dispersed among surviving peoples and seeded the roots of great civilizations. Although lacking historical rigor, these accounts have kept the legend alive, fueling everything from conspiracy theories to grand works of science fiction. Atlantis, in the popular imagination, has transformed into a symbol of the eternal quest. The desire to find, in the depths of time, a justification for our aspirations and our frustrations, the belief that once we were better and perhaps we might become better again. The fascination of Atlantis ultimately lies in its dual nature. It is simultaneously past and future, warning and promise. Its image, submerged in the deep waters of collective memory, evokes the sense that time is not a straight line but a cycle, where civilizations rise, flourish, decay, and vanish, leaving behind only fragments, whispers, legends. Every time new archaeological findings uncover ancient sunken cities, like the ruins of Heracleion in Egypt or coastal settlements swallowed by tsunamis, hope flickers anew that perhaps, hidden beneath silt and coral, the heart of Atlantis still beats. Each recovered artifact, each deciphered inscription, reminds us that human history is far deeper and more complex than we dare imagine, and that the boundaries between myth and reality may be far thinner than we like to believe. Thus, Atlantis continues to sail through the currents of human imagination, not merely lost in physical space, but in the uncharted territories of our longing and fears. It remains the eternal unanswered question, the hope for a greater truth, the ultimate symbol of our insatiable dream of better worlds, even as we know how fragile all greatness is. And as long as there are those who study old maps, who dive into unknown seas, who write and imagine stories of submerged kingdoms, Atlantis will remain alive, not in ruins or stones, but in the undying flame of human yearning. The treasure of the Templars. In the burning crucible of the Middle Ages, in a Europe marked by faith and war alike, there arose an order that would soon become legend. The poor fellow soldiers of Christ and of the Temple of Solomon, known simply as the Templars. Men of sword and prayer, of monastic discipline and martial ferocity, who, after their founding in Jerusalem in the 12th century, amassed a power and wealth that inspired admiration, envy, and fear in equal measure. A power that, following their dramatic downfall, gave rise to one of history's most persistent and alluring legends, the existence of a hidden, sacred treasure, a treasure whose pursuit still throbs within the collective imagination. The rise of the Templars was meteoric. Initially founded to protect pilgrims traveling to the Holy Land, the Knights quickly evolved into the first major financial institution in Europe. With houses in every Christian kingdom, they managed deposits, transferred funds, and granted loans, acting as bankers to kings and popes alike. Their network of fortresses, stretching from Jerusalem to Scotland, formed an impenetrable web of influence and wealth, sustained by both the devotion they inspired and the fear they commanded. But in 1307, driven by debt and greed, King Philip IV of France wove a conspiracy. On Friday, October 13th, Templars across the realm were arrested. They were accused of heresy, idolatry, and other monstrous crimes. Many were tortured into confessions and later executed. Their Grand Master, Jacques de Molay, perished at the stake in 1314, protesting his innocence to the very end and, according to some accounts, cursing his persecutors with his final breath. Yet when inquisitors sought out the treasures of the Templars, they found little. The supposed overflowing treasuries of Paris were empty. No jewels, no relics, no incriminating documents. Only silence and void. This absence of evidence became fertile ground for the growth of an irresistible legend. That the Templars, foreseeing their doom, had hidden their wealth, dispersing it to secret locations, entrusting it to their most faithful brothers, or perhaps sending it across distant seas beyond the reach of any king. Since then, the search for the treasure of the Templars has fired the imagination of countless generations. Some believe that part of their fortune was taken to Scotland, where the Templars survived in the shadows, protected by loyal clans and disguised within new orders of knighthood. Others place the treasure somewhere in the Iberian Peninsula, hidden in forgotten crypts of ancient monasteries, or within the subterranean passages of impenetrable castles. There are those who even propose that the Templars crossed the Atlantic long before Columbus, carrying with them sacred relics and forbidden maps. Yet beyond gold and precious stones, the Templar treasure, in its symbolic dimension, would be something far more powerful. Forbidden knowledge, sacred relics, secrets capable of altering the course of history. Among the relics attributed to the Templars are the Ark of the Covenant, which held the tablets of the law, the Holy Grail, the cup from the Last Supper of Christ, and the Spear of Destiny, the weapon that pierced the Savior's side. Each of these objects, wrapped in its own aura of myth and faith, would be a prize so coveted that its possession alone could justify centuries of intrigue, pursuit, and bloodshed. Literature, cinema, and popular culture have amplified this myth tirelessly. Novels such as Foucault's Pendulum by Umberto Eco, films like Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, television series, documentaries, and video games have repeatedly rekindled fascination with the Templars and their supposed legacy. Oak Island in Canada has been excavated for over 200 years in the hope of uncovering traces of the lost treasure. Every ambiguous discovery, every collapsed tunnel, every ancient artifact found in mysterious circumstances reinforces the illusion that the secret lies just within reach. Yet, as with all great myths, the true power of the treasure of the Templars lies not in its material existence, but in the symbolic force it exerts over us. It is the promise that, somewhere, a legacy of wisdom, of faith, of unyielding resistance against the corruption of the world, lies waiting. A legacy reserved for those pure enough, brave enough to be worthy of it. The treasure also represents the eternal struggle between spiritual and temporal power. The Templars, warrior monks, embodied that paradox. Soldiers of Christ, yet also bankers of kings, lords of castles, diplomats, and judges. Their downfall was not merely an act of royal greed, but the inevitable consequence of an internal contradiction between the ideal and the crushing weight of human ambition. The gold that vanished, if it ever truly existed, is not only the gold of coffers, but the gold of an idea, the dream of a brotherhood dedicated to a higher purpose, and the inevitable tragedy of its betrayal. Thus, while amateur archaeologists continue to dig in remote lands, while scholars pore over ancient codices in search of hidden clues, while dreamers trace impossible routes on faded maps and modern adventurers chase after worn symbols carved into stone, the treasure of the Templars remains a living force. Not because of the material wealth it might contain, but because it reminds us that, somewhere in the depths of history, there may be things worth the effort, the risk, and the faith. For ultimately, the search for the treasure of the Templars is a search for something that transcends time. A symbol of lost purity, forgotten knowledge, and the courage to stand against the gathering darkness. And as long as there are men and women willing to believe that not all has been lost, that not everything has been said, the treasure will continue to exist, beyond maps and beyond words, hidden in the burning core of human longing. The Nazi bell, Die Glocke. Among the many haunting echoes left behind by the Third Reich, there is one that resonates with a particularly chilling tone: Die Glocke, the bell. An object shrouded in secrecy, speculation, and fear, described by some as the most ambitious and dangerous project ever conceived by Nazi engineers. A machine with strange properties, said, according to legend, to have the power to alter time and space, to defy the known laws of physics, and to brush against the forbidden thresholds of human understanding. The story of Die Glocke does not emerge from the official archives of the Reich, nor from traditional military reports. Instead, it surfaces in the dark margins where scattered testimonies, wartime rumors, and post-war obsessions intertwine. It was the Polish journalist Igor Witkowski who, in the late 20th century, brought this story out of obscurity, drawing from alleged confessions of captured Nazi officers, declassified Soviet archives, and the elusive traces of military documents that spoke of impossible experiments. According to these sources, Die Glocke was a metallic structure resembling a large church bell, standing about 2 to 3 meters tall, covered in an unknown, perhaps ceramic material, which, when activated, generated a devastating energy field. Inside, 2 counter-rotating cylinders contained a silvery, highly radioactive substance called Cerium-525, which, under extreme conditions, unleashed effects that defied all logic. The solidification of liquids, the accelerated decay of living tissues, local gravitational anomalies, and, in the most extreme accounts, temporal displacements. The supposed development site was the Der Ries, the Giant, complex, a network of secret underground facilities hidden in the mountains of Lower Silesia, now part of modern-day Poland, a labyrinth of tunnels, laboratories, and armored chambers, constructed to house projects so secret that even within the highest echelons of the Nazi regime, their existence was known only in fragments. Building Der Ries and similar sites consumed vast quantities of resources during the desperate final years of the war, as Hitler increasingly placed his hopes on discovering a miracle weapon that could turn the tide of inevitable defeat. The fact that a project like Die Glocke could have arisen in such a context is hardly surprising. In the Reich's final years, the boundaries of classical science were often blurred, giving way to a fusion of cutting-edge technology and esoteric mysticism, a strange amalgam of hyper-rationalism and archaic superstition that mirrored the profound contradictions within Nazism itself. Reports about the effects of Die Glocke are nothing short of terrifying. Animals exposed to its generated field allegedly died instantly or underwent grotesque mutations. Plants withered within seconds. Even the scientific personnel involved reportedly suffered severe radiation sickness, neurological damage, and psychological disorders. In darker versions of the story, it is said that human beings, prisoners, were subjected to the experiments, used as living subjects in attempts to manipulate gravity or break through the barriers between dimensions. The trail grows colder with the collapse of the Third Reich. According to Witkowski and other researchers, Die Glocke may have been spirited away from Europe in the war's final days, perhaps to South America, where many Nazi officials found refuge, or possibly captured in secret by the United States under Operation Paperclip, which absorbed many German scientists into American military projects. From that point on, the object disappears from documented history, leaving behind only an unsettling afterimage in the folklore of lost technologies and suppressed discoveries. If Die Glocke truly existed, the implications of its existence are almost beyond comprehension. It would not have been merely a weapon of war, but an attempt to alter the very fabric of reality, to twist space and time themselves to human will. And this possibility raises haunting questions. How far can a civilization go in its pursuit of absolute power? What price is it willing to pay for forbidden knowledge? And more disturbingly still, if such experiments did reach into the structure of existence itself, what invisible scars might they have left behind, woven into the world we inhabit without our awareness? The image of Die Glocke, suspended somewhere in a dark underground hangar, humming with energies beyond human comprehension, has been seared into the cultural imagination as the ultimate technological nightmare. The moment when humankind, in its reckless striving to become like gods, risks losing its very soul. It is an echo of the oldest myths, from the Tower of Babel to the chained Prometheus, where the transgression of sacred limits inevitably leads to catastrophe. Perhaps, after all, Die Glocke never existed as a tangible machine. Perhaps it is instead a parable, a warning cloaked in the guise of an artifact, a reminder of the dangers that lurk when ambition and knowledge are pursued without wisdom, when power is divorced from compassion. But the very fact that the legend endures, that people continue to search for its traces in dusty archives and forgotten ruins, speaks to a deeper truth, the unquenchable human fascination with mysteries that brush against the impossible, with forbidden doors that, even knowing the risks, we cannot resist attempting to open. And so, Die Glocke continues to revolve in the vortex of our collective memory, not as a machine of steel and wires, but as a chilling symbol of our loftiest dreams and darkest fears, eternally embedded in the subconscious of mankind. The Lost Library of Alexandria. There was a time in human history when knowledge rose as a beacon, a nearly divine promise that ignorance would not have the final word. That promise took shape through stone, parchment, and flame in the Library of Alexandria, the most ambitious intellectual undertaking of antiquity, a dream of universal wisdom that, like all pure utopias, ultimately found itself engulfed in the shadows of its own destruction. The image of its endless halls, shelves overflowing with manuscripts, corridors echoing with the voices of philosophers, mathematicians, astronomers, and poets, remains to this day a nostalgic echo of what humanity once dared to imagine, and perhaps will never reach again. Founded in the 3rd century before Christ under the reign of Ptolemy I Soter, a former general of Alexander the Great, Alexandria was never intended to be just another Mediterranean city. It was conceived as a crossroads between East and West, between past and future, between the tangible and the dreamed. The library, housed within the grand complex of the Moai, the Temple of the Muses, was built with the explicit aim of collecting all human knowledge, cataloging every book, every treatise, every song, every fragment of science or myth known to the civilized world. Ancient accounts speak of a policy bordering on obsession. Every ship docking at Alexandria's port was searched, and any books on board were copied, the original retained in the library, while sometimes only a lesser quality copy was returned to the owner. Ambassadors and merchants were tasked with acquiring rare texts during their travels. Foreign works were translated into Greek in an unprecedented effort to dismantle the walls of language and make knowledge a shared heritage. No one knows precisely how many works the library housed at its height. Estimates range from 40,000 to 700,000 scrolls. A staggering figure in an era when every book was laboriously hand-copied, letter by scribes dedicating entire lifetimes to preserving just a few lines. Preserved within were lost works of Homer, medical treatises by Hippocrates, the geometries of Euclid, chronicles of civilizations already ancient even then. Astronomers like Eratosthenes measured the Earth's circumference with a precision that would need only minor correction 2,000 years later. Mathematicians like Archimedes and scientists like Hero of Alexandria designed machines that bordered on the miraculous. Yet the true miracle of Alexandria was not the accumulation of manuscripts alone. It was the attitude toward knowledge, the spirit of constant inquiry, the refusal to accept unexamined truths. It was a place where questions were not born from superstition but from genuine curiosity, where science, art, philosophy, and religion were not isolated domains but different expressions of a single shared impulse, to understand the world and our place within it. Who, then, was the destroyer of that dream? There is no simple answer. The destruction of the Library of Alexandria was a process rather than an event, a slow fading rather than a single catastrophe. Sources speak of several acts of devastation. Julius Caesar, during his campaign in Egypt in 48 BCE, set fire to parts of the city to protect his fleet, and some accounts claim that the flames spread to the library's warehouses. Centuries later, under Christian rule, religious zeal regarded many of the preserved works as heretical. Theological conflicts led to censorship and destruction. And later still, during the Islamic conquest, further tensions between faith and knowledge may have sealed the fate of what little remained. In truth, the Library of Alexandria was perhaps not destroyed in a single moment, but worn away like a coastline subjected to relentless waves. Each fire, each act of looting, each regime indifferent or hostile to free thought tore away another fragment of that dream until only myth remained, like the lingering perfume of a flower that no longer exists. What was lost was not merely books, but possibilities. Unique works on medicine, astronomy, physics, literature, and philosophy disappeared without a trace, condemning humanity to rediscover, centuries later and at immense cost, knowledge it had once already possessed. How many advancements could have been made earlier? How many questions might have been answered long before? What paths of history might have unfolded differently if that collective memory had been preserved? And yet, in its absence, the Library of Alexandria has become even more powerful. It stands as the eternal symbol of the fragility of knowledge, and the urgent need to protect it against barbarism, fanaticism, and indifference. It reminds us that knowledge, though brilliant in its light, rests always on the precarious foundation of human stewardship. That each generation must decide anew whether it will be the guardian or the executioner of the intellectual heritage it inherits. Today, in a world where digital libraries store more information than 1 million ancient archives combined, and where the global network grants immediate access to texts and data once considered treasures beyond price, the lesson of Alexandria remains just as vital. For the issue is not merely how much knowledge we accumulate, but how deeply we respect its fragility, how much we value the act of preserving, sharing, and questioning free from dogma and fear. The lost library of Alexandria continues to burn in our collective imagination, not as a defeatist warning, but as an inspiration. It tells us that the effort to understand, to record, to inquire is never in vain, even if circumstances may destroy what we build. It teaches us that the impulse to seek knowledge is itself an act of resistance against darkness. And perhaps, somewhere in the corners of time, among scattered fragments, among the whispers of disintegrated scrolls, Alexandria still murmurs its promise to those who know how to listen. That as long as there remains a desire to understand, as long as there are those who write, who read, who preserve, the flame kindled in those marble-lit corridors will never be fully extinguished. The Bermuda Triangle. There exists a corner of the ocean where compasses go mad, airplanes vanish without a trace, and ships are swallowed into an unfathomable void. A vast stretch of seemingly ordinary waters, bordered by Miami, Puerto Rico, and the Bermuda Islands, which has earned a name that still evokes mystery and fear, the Bermuda Triangle. A place where logic bends, explanations dissolve like mist, and human certainties founder before an abyss that seems to watch us silently from the depths. The myth of the Bermuda Triangle did not arise all at once but was woven over decades, fed by real disappearances, media exaggerations, and a persistent fascination with the edges of the known world. One of the earliest cases to capture public attention was that of Flight 19, a squadron of 5 U.S. Navy torpedo bombers that vanished during a routine training mission in December 1945. The pilots' final communications spoke of disorientation, malfunctioning compasses, and seas that did not match their maps. When a rescue aircraft sent after them also disappeared, the foundation of a legend was laid. From that point onward, every tragedy in the region seemed to carry an echo of fatalism. Ships that set sail under blue skies and never reached their destinations. Planes that sent their last transmission only to vanish, leaving no floating debris. Entire crews found missing from abandoned vessels, without signs of struggle or violence, as if they had simply evaporated. Whether these stories are true in every detail is almost irrelevant. They have sunk deep into the collective imagination, turning the Bermuda Triangle into a modern legend. Numerous theories have been developed to explain the phenomenon. Some lean toward scientific causes. Extremely strong ocean currents like the Gulf Stream that could quickly sweep debris away from accident sites. The sudden release of methane gas from the ocean floor, reducing water density and causing ships to sink abruptly. Violent thunderstorms that can appear without warning and disorient navigators and damage aircraft instruments. Yet, despite the plausibility of these explanations, they have never quite extinguished the allure of wilder theories. Some speak of space-time distortions, of portals to other dimensions opening in the fabric of the world. Others claim that vanished civilizations like Atlantis still exert influence from beneath the ocean, manipulating forces beyond our comprehension. Still others suggest the intervention of extraterrestrial intelligences, using the triangle as a testing ground. Perhaps the true magnetism of the Bermuda Triangle lies precisely in the coexistence of these explanations, the plausible and the fantastical side by side. For beyond the hard data, which shows that, proportionally to the volume of traffic passing through the area, accidents are not more frequent than elsewhere, the Bermuda Triangle persists as a symbol of the great unresolved mystery, a reminder that, despite all our maps, technologies, and certainties, there are still corners of the Earth where randomness, human error, or the inexplicable hold sway. Literature and film have played a critical role in consolidating the myth. From sensationalist books of the 1960s and 70s to movies depicting ghost ships sailing through supernatural mists, the triangle has served as a canvas for all kinds of fantasies. Meetings with lost pasts, secret civilizations, cosmic tragedies. It has become a mirror where we project our fears of the unknown and our yearning for a world that remains wild and unconquered. Perhaps, deep down, our fascination with the Bermuda Triangle is not so much fear of physical disappearance but fear of losing the illusion that everything can be explained. In an age where information is just a click away and almost every corner of the globe has been mapped and analyzed, we need places that resist domestication by reason. We need to believe that there are still zones where logic falters, where time and space might rebel against the structures we have so confidently built. The Bermuda Triangle reminds us that beneath the apparent normalcy of the world, beneath the neatly charted navigation routes and flight paths, there still beats an ancient, untamed ocean, a vast heart of water, undomesticated even in the age of satellites and global connectivity. It whispers that the sea, as in the days of the great explorers, remains a place of hidden challenges, invisible dangers, and unanswered questions. Perhaps, in every ship that vanishes without a trace, in every pilot who loses his bearings under seemingly benign skies, the ancient pact between humanity and the unknown is renewed. The acknowledgement that not everything can be foreseen, that not every disappearance can be prevented, that no matter how much we advance, there will always be frontiers where the world refuses to be neatly contained by our formulas. Ultimately, the Bermuda Triangle is a mirror of ourselves. It confronts us with our smallness before the immensity of the cosmos, with the fragility of our certainties, with the strange and terrible beauty of a universe that remains, at its deepest core, a place of mystery. And as long as there are sailors plotting new courses across old maps, pilots crossing skies where radios fade into static, storytellers repeating, again and again, the old tales of impossible vanishings, the Bermuda Triangle will endure, not only in the ocean, but in the restless hearts of humankind. Easter Island and its Moai. Amidst the vast blue of the Pacific Ocean, so distant from everything that it feels like a whisper of land lost among the endless waves, rises Easter Island, known to its inhabitants as Rapa Nui. It is a place that seems to belong less to the tangible world than to a universal mythology. A land of stone giants, of immutable secrets, of silences that span the centuries. There, under immense skies and winds that never cease, thousands of Moai, those monumental statues with serene, melancholic faces, stand watch, guarding within their silence the history of a people who sought to immortalize their memory by carving it into the very rock of the world. When the first European navigators arrived in 1722, astonished to find human life in such an isolated place, they could scarcely imagine the magnitude of the culture unfolding before their eyes. They encountered an arid island, devoid of trees, scarred by erosion, and populated by colossal statues that faced inward toward the land, as if their duty were not to protect against what might come from across the sea, but to watch over what grew within. No one at the time could explain how an isolated people, without metal tools, without wheels, and without beasts of burden, had managed to raise and transport sculptures reaching 10 meters in height and weighing more than 80 tons. The Moai are far more than mere sculptures. They are fragments of soul fossilized in stone, guardians of a worldview in which ancestors do not fully die but remain to guide and sustain the living. Each figure represents an important ancestor, a chief, a sage, someone whose spiritual force extended beyond death. From their eyes, once inlaid with white coral and black obsidian, emanated mana, the sacred energy that nourished the land and the people. The process of creating a Moai was, in itself, an act of profound devotion. They were carved from the volcanic tuff of Reino Raraku, where dozens of unfinished figures still lie today, as if some invisible hand had abruptly halted the great work. For months, perhaps years, the sculptors toiled at the quarry, shaping faces that, despite an apparent uniformity, display a remarkable variety of expressions and nuances. Each Moai was unique, a mineral echo of the being it represented. Moving these colossi from the quarry to their ceremonial platforms, the Ahu was a titanic challenge that baffled observers for centuries. Some theories suggested the use of wooden sleds, rollers, or intricate lever systems. Yet one of the most fascinating ideas proposes that the Moai walked, that they were carefully rocked from side to side, moved upright by the synchronized effort and chants of hundreds of islanders. This vision, of statues gliding rhythmically across the landscape under the spell of sacred songs, adds a layer of poetry to an enigma that already defies pure reason. However, the splendor of Rapa Nui did not endure forever. Something shattered the fragile balance that had allowed this society to construct its monuments and sustain a vibrant culture in the midst of the ocean. The most widely accepted theory speaks of ecological collapse. The excessive felling of trees needed to transport the Moai left the island vulnerable to erosion, resource depletion, and famine. Over time, internal rivalries, dwindling food supplies, and clan conflicts would have torn apart the social fabric, transforming a society of builders into one of mere survivors. But the fall of Rapa Nui, like that of so many civilizations, is not only a story of destruction but also one of resilience. Despite enslavement by European traders, despite the diseases that decimated the population, despite the cultural impositions that nearly erased their language and traditions, the Rapa Nui people endured. In their oral traditions, their dances, their carvings, and their rituals, they preserved the flame of their identity. Today, the descendants of those who sculpted and moved the Moai still inhabit the island, restoring their ahu, honoring their ancestors. Standing before a Moai at dawn, as the first light stains the slopes of Reino Raraku or the coastal altars in hues of red, is more than an aesthetic experience. It is a confrontation with the mystery of human existence. It invites the question: what force drives a people to carve their soul into stone, to defy gravity and time in order to leave behind a testimony of their fleeting passage through the world? It reminds us that, beyond facts, figures, and theories, what survives of civilizations are not their technologies but their dreams, petrified in forms that can still speak centuries later. Rapa Nui teaches us that it takes neither vast empires nor armies nor palaces of gold to leave a mark upon history. It takes only a handful of men and women determined to converse with eternity, to plant in the midst of nothingness a message that, even if waves erase their tracks and winds smooth their faces, will continue to whisper, "We were here. We fought, we loved, we believed. And though we pass away, our voice remains for those who choose to listen." The island, wrapped in its majestic silence, continues to defy those who seek to explain everything. Every fallen Moai, every restored altar, every whispered legend tells us that there are truths which cannot be confined by science nor fully captured by modern logic. That the story of Rapa Nui, like the story of all great cultures, is not merely a sequence of facts but an act of faith. The faith that the dreams of humankind can outlive their creators. And as long as there are those who, standing before a solitary Moai, feel time pause and hear the stone begin to speak, Rapa Nui will endure, pulsing in the secret heart of the ocean. The origin of Stonehenge. Across the vast plains of Wiltshire, in the south of England, where the mist seems to hang eternally over the damp grass, rises one of humanity's most enigmatic and evocative monuments, Stonehenge. A circle of colossal stones, standing in silent communion with the sky, their shadows and alignments seeming to whisper forgotten secrets to the wind. There is no place like it on Earth, where time feels so dense, where antiquity is not an abstract notion but a tangible presence that permeates every step, every glance. Stonehenge is not the result of a single act of construction, but the outcome of centuries, perhaps millennia, of human effort, layered dreams, generations laying upon that same patch of land their faith, their rudimentary science, their yearning for permanence against the fleeting nature of existence. The earliest traces date back to around 3000 BC, when a large circular ditch was excavated, the first sketch of a project that would grow ever more complex and mysterious over the ages. What we see today are only the final ruins of a series of successive arrangements. Initially, a simple circle of wood and earth. Later, around 2500 BC, came the stones, the massive sarsens transported from more than 30 kilometers away, and the enigmatic bluestones whose origin in the Preseli Hills of Wales, over 200 kilometers distant, still challenges all modern logic about what a Neolithic society could achieve. How did they move such colossal weights, some exceeding 30 tons, without the tools we consider indispensable today? What driving force, what sacred purpose, propelled these people to undertake such a feat. Each stone, placed with bewildering precision, follows a design that was neither random nor improvised. Stonehenge is precisely aligned with the summer and winter solstices. On the days when the sun reaches its extremes, its light cuts through the megaliths at angles that seem to summon not only the passage of time but humanity's participation in a vast, subtle cosmic order. It was a monumental calendar, yes, but also a temple, a mirror of the heavens upon the earth, an affirmation that through stone and silence, humankind could engage in dialogue with the universe. Archaeologists have debated for generations the purpose of Stonehenge. Some interpret it as an astronomical observatory, a primitive computer capable of predicting seasons and eclipses. Others emphasize its ceremonial function, perhaps as a center of healing, a place where body and spirit could be restored. There are also those who propose it was a sanctuary of the dead, a symbolic bridge between the world of the living and that of the ancestors, where secret rituals wove the continuity of the community. Equally fascinating is the enigma of who the builders were. Evidence suggests that different peoples at different times left their marks on the site, adapting it to their evolving needs and beliefs. An enterprise of such scale would have required not only an advanced social organization but also a shared vision, a collective sense of purpose capable of mobilizing hundreds of people over years, perhaps generations. Stonehenge, in that sense, is the stone-born testimony of memory built in layers, a legacy reaching across the mists of time. The choice of location also appears far from random. The Salisbury Plain is dotted with other prehistoric monuments, burial mounds, processional avenues, smaller circles of stone and wood. Everything suggests a ritual landscape carefully designed, where each element communicated with the others in a sacred choreography, invisibly guided by principles we are only beginning to glimpse. Stonehenge was the beating heart of a spiritual world whose pulses extended far beyond the visible circle of stones, weaving earth and sky together in a deep and intricate network of meaning. And yet, despite all our excavations and measurements of celestial alignments, something essential about Stonehenge remains beyond the grasp of our modern tools. An emotional resonance, a symbolic weight no archaeological method can exhaust. To walk among its megaliths, to touch the rough surfaces of stones that have withstood 5 millennia of wind and rain, is not merely an act of historical curiosity. It is a silent dialogue with the inexplicable. Perhaps that is the monument's most enduring mystery. Its reminder that not everything must be reduced to utilitarian functions, that not everything can be confined within rational definitions. Stonehenge speaks of an age when humans built not only to survive but to transcend, when collective effort was directed not solely toward immediate needs, but toward inscribing human presence into eternity, toward participating, however fleetingly, in the invisible forces that govern the cosmos. Today, despite the tourists, the drones, the scientific studies that have mapped every furrow in the soil, Stonehenge continues to radiate the silent force that only truly sacred places possess. It needs no words, no defenses. Its mere existence is enough to awaken, in those who approach with an open heart, the intuition that once we could see beyond ourselves, that we could lift our gaze to the star-strewn horizon and find there a reflection of our own soul. Ultimately, the origin of Stonehenge is not measured in tons of stone or astronomical calculations. It is measured in wonder, in the ability of a distant civilization to dream grandly and to commit its vital energy to something that pointed beyond the ephemeral. And as long as there are those who, standing beneath the sun of the solstice or under the endless rain of the plain, look upon these stones and wonder what those ancient builders sought, what they knew, what they felt, Stonehenge will continue to fulfill its mission, to be a bridge of stone between human time and eternity. The Beast of Gévaudan. In the second half of the 18th century, as France staggered between the final gleams of absolutism and the first tremors of a revolution that would reshape the world, a remote and rugged region was engulfed in a nightmare that had no place in philosophical treatises or the discourses of the Enlightenment. Among the forests, valleys, and impoverished villages of Gévaudan, a land of wild mountains and persistent mists, now part of modern Lazara, an unknown creature began to sow terror with a violence that exceeded any previous account. The first death was recorded in June 1764. A young shepherdess was found brutally attacked, her body mutilated so savagely that the villagers spoke of something more than a wolf, of something that hunted not for hunger but for a dark, almost malevolent pleasure. Soon the attacks multiplied. Farmers, women, children, solitary shepherds, no one was safe. Survivors and those who discovered the bodies reported chillingly similar details. An enormous creature with reddish or grayish fur, a white chest, oversized fangs, and unnatural strength. Some claimed to have seen a beast walking upright. Others swore its gaze was nearly human. In a world still profoundly religious, where the devil was a tangible presence and nature had not yet been tamed by science or reason, supernatural explanations were quick to emerge. The beast was seen as divine punishment, a demonic messenger sent to expiate the sins of a land abandoned by God. Some linked it to ancient witchcraft, to secret experiments, or even to dark pacts sealed deep within the forest. But beyond speculation, the victims were real. It is estimated that between 1764 and 1767, over 100 people died violently, many more were wounded, and daily life was paralyzed. Families abandoned their fields, villages organized night patrols, churches held protective masses. Fear permeated every word, every gesture, every lonely path through the woods. King Louis XV, alarmed by the continued attacks and the damaging perception of his inability to protect his subjects, sent professional hunters, soldiers, and offered rewards for anyone who could kill the creature. Famous marksmen and trackers ventured into the dense forests of Gévaudan, organizing massive hunts that rarely succeeded. Wolves were killed, yes, and some were exhibited as trophies. Motionless, bloodied, displayed before hopeful crowds. But the deaths continued. The beast seemed to be something else. More elusive, tougher, almost intelligent. The people, trapped between terror and helplessness, wove their own mythology. Some believed there was not one beast but many. Others asserted that it could change shape, that it was immune to ordinary bullets. Stories spread of a sinister handler who had released the beast as a tool of revenge or madness. The narratives intertwined, growing like a dark tide no longer nourished by facts but by the ancient well of human fear. The story took a decisive turn in 1767 when Jean Chastel, a local farmer, managed to kill an animal that reportedly matched the descriptions of the beast. It is said that Chastel had blessed his bullets with holy water and prayed before shooting, as if he knew he was confronting not just a creature of flesh, but a symbol of evil itself. After the death of this final specimen, the attacks almost completely ceased, and slowly, the region began to recover its fragile equilibrium. But what truly was the Beast of Gévaudan? Modern theories abound, though none can claim absolute certainty. Many researchers believe it was an unusually large wolf, or perhaps a pack of wolves that, driven by extreme hunger, had developed abnormal aggression. Others suggest the existence of a hybrid, a cross between a wolf and a large dog, bred and released either accidentally or intentionally. Some propose even more exotic explanations. Big cats brought from distant colonies, escaped from private collections, or even a hyena, a species unknown to most peasants of the time, which could have triggered panic in an isolated and superstitious region. What is certain is that the nature of the creature that haunted Gévaudan remains shrouded in the same mist that cloaks its hills. Yet beyond its zoological reality, what makes the Beast of Gévaudan truly fascinating is not just its ferocity, but the way it embodied the collective fears of a society on the brink. In a world where old certainties were crumbling and new ideas and liberties were unsettling the established order, the beast emerged as a brutal reminder that chaos always lurks nearby, that beneath the fragile veneer of civilization, the ancient darkness can awaken at any moment. The beast, in a sense, was a mirror. It reflected the fear of the unknown, of the wild, of the loss of control. It revealed the human need to craft stories, to weave narratives that give shape to what cannot be comprehended. For in the face of pure horror, of inexplicable violence, people do not resign themselves to silence. They invent, they sing, they whisper tales into the night. Today, in the heart of Gévaudan, amid green fields and villages that seem to defy the passage of time, the memory of the beast endures. There are statues, museums, trails that recreate its hunt, and in taverns, between laughter and glasses of wine, The old tales are still told, of the monster that challenged a king and sowed terror across enlightened France. Perhaps, ultimately, it matters little what the beast truly was. What matters is that it existed, or that its shadow existed, and that in its brief and ferocious passage through history, it revealed an uncomfortable truth. That fear is as old as humanity itself, and that beneath the lights of civilization, the wild heartbeat of an incomprehensible universe still pounds. The Philadelphia Experiment. Among the annals of modern history, few stories have woven a web so dense with mystery, controversy, and fascination as the so-called Philadelphia Experiment. It is said that, during the dark days of World War II, while the world fought a titanic battle for its future, the United States Navy embarked on a project so audacious that it bordered on the fantastic, making a warship disappear from sight and even from physical reality itself. An act of invisibility, of teleportation, of manipulating time and space that, if true, would have not only altered the course of the war but also forever changed our understanding of the universe. The story begins, according to the most popular versions, in 1943 at the Philadelphia Naval Shipyard. The USS Eldridge, a newly commissioned destroyer escort, is said to have been the unwitting protagonist of this clandestine experiment. It is said that using principles derived from Albert Einstein's unified field theory, military scientists sought to create an electromagnetic field of such intensity that it would bend light around the ship, rendering it invisible to radar and to the human eye. The accounts, fragmented and enriched over the decades, describe scenes that could have been torn from the pages of a science fiction novel. A ship enveloped in a strange greenish glow, an electric hum filling the air, the hull of the Eldridge violently shuddering before suddenly vanishing from sight. Some witnesses claimed that the ship not only disappeared from Philadelphia but briefly materialized in Norfolk, Virginia, hundreds of kilometers away, before instantly returning to its original location. The consequences of this supposed feat were, according to these sources, catastrophic. Many crew members were said to have suffered devastating effects. Some were found fused into the metal structures of the ship, their limbs trapped in decks and bulkheads. Others lost their sanity entirely, condemned to wander in states of permanent madness. Some simply vanished without a trace, as if trapped in a hidden fold of reality. There were stories of survivors suffering from freezing episodes, disappearing and reappearing without control, like ghosts condemned to an erratic existence. The myth of the Philadelphia Experiment did not arise spontaneously. Its primary promoter was a man named Carl Allen, who, under the alias Carlos Miguel Allende, wrote a series of letters in the 1950s to astronomer and ufologist Morris K. Jessup. In these letters, Allende detailed the supposed experiment, blending fragments of scientific theories, esoteric references, and alleged first-hand accounts. Jessup, fascinated and disturbed, attempted to investigate the matter but ultimately fell into despair and discredit, ending in his mysterious death in 1959, officially ruled a suicide. From that point on, the Philadelphia Experiment spread like an unstoppable shadow, fueling books, documentaries, movies, and countless conspiracy theories. Each generation seemed to add new details, new interpretations, new links to secret government programs, time travel, and parallel universes. Some spoke of Nikola Tesla's involvement, of hidden scientists working at the edges of official knowledge, of technologies far more terrifying than anything humanity was meant to wield. The United States Navy, for its part, has consistently denied any involvement in such a project. Official records state that the USS Eldridge was never in Philadelphia at the relevant times, and that the technologies described simply did not exist in 1943. Skeptics see the entire story as a melange of rumors, misinterpretations of routine degaussing experiments, common practices to protect ships from magnetic mines, and the fevered imagination of particularly creative individuals. Yet the persistence of the myth suggests that, beyond its historical veracity, the Philadelphia Experiment embodies a deeper human yearning, the desire to break the chains of known reality, to cross invisible boundaries that bind us to a world governed by immutable physical laws. In a time of total war, when destruction was the daily currency, dreaming of weapons that could manipulate time and space was not mere fantasy, but a logical extension of a desperate survival instinct. Moreover, the experiment reflects an even older anxiety: the fear of the excesses of knowledge, the danger of playing with forces we do not fully understand. Like the Greek myths where mortals defied the gods and paid a terrible price, the Philadelphia experiment tells a story where scientific hubris leads not to triumph, but to horror. The image of the sailor fused with steel, of the man trapped between dimensions, remains a chilling metaphor for what happens when we cross thresholds we were not meant to pass. Following the tale of the Philadelphia experiment, one feels that the facts themselves are less important than the resonance of the narrative. It speaks of a world where the impossible brushes against the real, where every promise of science carries within it the hidden shadow of a warning. It reminds us that every door open to the unknown can be not just a passage, but a precipice. Today, more than 80 years after the alleged events, the USS Eldridge no longer sails the seas. It was transferred to the Greek Navy in the 1950s and eventually dismantled in the 1990s. Its metal, melted and reforged, lives on in other vessels, in far more ordinary realities. Yet the experiment that turned it into legend continues to navigate the murky waters of our imagination, resisting the corrosion of oblivion, reminding us that some questions, even unanswered, have the power to reshape the way we see the world. Perhaps, ultimately, the Philadelphia experiment does not need to be proven or disproven at all. Perhaps its true place lies in that elastic space between history and myth, in the realm where the human mind, if only for a fleeting moment, dares to dream of touching the unattainable. The lost Mayan codices. At some point in the remote past, in the heart of the dense jungles of Mesoamerica, Mayan men and women wrote on the bark of fig trees and fibers of agave, carefully folding the sheets into accordion shapes, painting with fine-haired brushes and mineral inks a vision of the world so rich and complex that even today it remains almost impossible to fully grasp. These were the codices, portable libraries where time, cosmos, religion, mathematics, art, medicine, and history were seamlessly interwoven. Out of hundreds, perhaps thousands of these works, only 4 have survived the ruthless march of centuries and the brutality of conquest. The rest, an ocean of knowledge, vanished, swallowed by flames, lost to forgetfulness, obliterated by intolerance. The Mayan codices were far more than books. They did not merely convey information. They were sacred instruments, open gateways between the visible world and unseen dimensions, maps of a plural reality where time was not linear but a tangle of cycles, flowing together like rivers in perpetual motion. Every symbol, every stroke, every chosen color was not the whim of an artist, but followed strict laws of magical and astronomical correspondences. A codex was, in itself, a condensed fragment of the universe, embodied in fragile yet powerful matter. When the Spanish conquistadors arrived in the 16th century, they found a wounded but still vibrant civilization whose scholars, the Aj or keepers of the holy books, zealously guarded their codices. The friars, unable or unwilling to understand what these documents represented, viewed them as works of idolatry, pacts with the devil, living heresies that had to be eradicated. Thus, in public pyres on dusty plazas under the Yucatan sun, hundreds of codices burned, reduced to ash while the people who had crafted them watched helplessly as their collective memory dissolved into smoke. The most infamous act of this cultural genocide was led by Friar Diego de Landa, a name that even today resonates with bitter ambivalence. The man who destroyed almost everything and, paradoxically, also the man who tried to document fragments of the world he was annihilating. In his Relation de las Cosas de Yucatan, Landa recorded that the Maya wrote in books made from the roots of trees, and that in them they recorded their ancient things, their sciences, and their ceremonies. He added, with chilling simplicity, "We burned them all, which they regretted greatly, and which caused them much pain." Today, only 4 Mayan codices survive: the Dresden Codex, the Madrid Codex, the Paris Codex, and the controversial Grolier Codex, the latter still the subject of fierce debates over its authenticity. Each is a tiny window into a lost world, a silent witness to a body of knowledge that could have rivaled, in depth and sophistication, any intellectual corpus of the ancient world. The Dresden Codex, for example, contains astronomical tables of astonishing precision, capable of predicting solar and lunar eclipses with accuracy that continues to awe modern scientists. The Madrid Codex offers glimpses of agricultural rituals and seasonal celebrations, while the Paris Codex, more damaged, hints at prophetic calendars and divine cycles. Yet the inevitable question remains, what other codices once existed? What worlds did they narrate? What sciences did they preserve? What mysteries did they whisper to those who could read their intricate glyphs? Some say there were codices dedicated exclusively to medicine, describing plants, poisons, and complex healing methods. Others chronicled heroic deeds of kings and warriors, sacred genealogies, and pacts between humans and gods. Perhaps there were even treatises of philosophical reflection on the nature of the soul and the destiny of the cosmos. The loss is not merely quantitative but qualitative. With the destruction of the codices, a way of thinking vanished, one that did not separate science from religion, art from knowledge, history from myth. Mayan thought, woven into those living sheets of bark, was a continuous fabric where every phenomenon found its place within an intricate web of meaning. Without the codices, all that remains are scattered fragments, torn pieces of a grand tapestry we can only glimpse. There were efforts to salvage something. Some indigenous scholars, under the pressure of evangelization, transferred parts of their knowledge to new mediums, writing in Mayan languages but using the Latin alphabet. Thus were born the books of Chilam Balam, cultural hybrids that preserved mythologies, prophecies, and chronicles of the conquest. Yet even these texts were filtered, mutilated, reinterpreted under the weight of a world that no longer acknowledged the validity of the original worldview. The lost Mayan codices are not merely a tragedy of the past. They serve as a warning for the present. They remind us of the fragility of human memory, of how easily centuries of effort, love, and inquiry can be obliterated by fanaticism, ignorance, or the arrogance of believing oneself the sole possessor of truth. Every burned library, every dying language, every codex reduced to ash is an amputation of collective consciousness, a wound that impoverishes all of humanity. And yet, perhaps somewhere, hidden in unexplored caves, in sealed chambers beneath cities swallowed by vines, some codices still survive. There are those who believe, and perhaps it is not mere illusion, that one day a hidden book will emerge, intact in its fragility, ready to tell us stories we have only dared to imagine. It would not be the first time the jungle, the Earth's living archive, has returned fragments of what we thought forever lost. Meanwhile, the 4 surviving codices challenge us, calling us to see beyond their graphic beauty, beyond their archaeological rarity, to perceive in their pages the echo of a civilization that, though wounded, still speaks to us. In the subtle vibration of its glyphs, in the suspended music of its calendars, in the deep breath of its gaze toward the infinite. Ultimately, the lost Mayan codices are a lesson in humility. They teach us that all human knowledge, no matter how vast and brilliant, remains vulnerable. That every culture, even at the peak of its flowering, walks a tightrope above an abyss of possible forgetting. And perhaps the greatest tribute we can pay to the ancient sages of maize, time, and stars is never to surrender the search, never to stop asking questions, never to cease listening to the whispers of the past that still resonate in the green thickets of memory. The Mystery of Antikythera. At the dawn of the 20th century, when the world still gazed reverently upon ancient ruins without suspecting how many secrets might slumber beneath their rubble, a group of Greek sponge divers, pushed off course by a violent storm, sought shelter near a small rocky island called Antikythera. They were looking for sustenance from the depths of the sea, not for marvels but fate, that old weaver of destinies, had reserved for them a discovery that would forever alter our perception of ancient ingenuity. There, on a bed of coral, cloaked in centuries of silence, lay the scattered remains of a Roman shipwreck. Amid corroded statues, shattered amphorae, and the broken remnants of a cargo seemingly frozen in time, a seemingly insignificant object emerged. A mass of greenish bronze, fragmented and almost unrecognizable to the untrained eye. For decades it was treated as little more than archaeological scrap, barely worthy of attention. Yet when finally examined with greater care, it revealed a complexity that defied every logical assumption about the technological capabilities of the ancient world. The Antikythera mechanism, as it is now known, is essentially an analog computer constructed in the 1st century before Christ. A device of gears, scales, and disks, engineered to predict astronomical positions with a precision that, until its discovery, was believed utterly beyond the reach of ancient technology. With its dials, inscriptions, and intricate systems of gear trains, it could forecast eclipses, track lunar phases and planetary cycles, and even indicate the timing of the ancient Olympic Games. The very existence of such a sophisticated artifact from antiquity posed a disquieting question. How much of what we believe we know about the technical achievements of ancient civilizations is, in reality, a misinterpretation of a far richer, now-lost legacy? Until the discovery of the mechanism, the Greeks were credited with remarkable advances in philosophy, art, and mathematics, but not with mechanical engineering of such dazzling complexity. The Antikythera mechanism stood alone, an anomaly, a fragment of a future that should not have existed in the past. Modern research, combining high-resolution X-rays, 3D scans, and painstaking physical reconstructions, has revealed miniaturization and mechanical precision unmatched until the master clockmakers of medieval Europe, more than 14 centuries later. Every wheel, every pivot, every tiny inscription barely visible to the naked eye, speaks of knowledge not improvised but passed down carefully through generations of learned artisans. The inscriptions discovered on the mechanism suggest that it was based on astronomical theories developed in the schools of Hipparchus and perhaps Aristarchus of Samos. These were not wild guesses. They were systematic observations, geometric models of the heavens that came close to mathematical perfection. The device was not merely a calendar, nor a portable planetarium. It was, in some profound way, a physical embodiment of the known universe, a sublime fusion of science, technology, and spirituality. Who built it? For whom? These questions, while legitimate, pale before the essential truth offered by the object itself. That somewhere, in a forgotten workshop of ancient Greece, there were minds capable of conceiving and hands capable of crafting a masterpiece that pushed the boundaries of what was thought possible. How many other such devices may have vanished beneath the waves, lost in fires, buried by the wars that razed cities and consumed libraries? The fact that the mechanism was found aboard a Roman shipwreck adds another layer of complexity to its story. It was probably not built for Rome, but was being transported there, perhaps as spoils of war, or as an object of extraordinary value destined for the hands of a high-ranking official. It is easy to imagine a Roman aristocrat desiring not merely jewels or sculptures, but a machine of the gods, an object capable of capturing the order of the cosmos in tangible form. Yet even today, the Antikythera mechanism remains more a question than an answer. We know only a fraction of its original design. Many gears are missing, many of its functions remain shrouded in hypotheses. Every attempt to reconstruct it is, at heart, an act of imaginative archaeology, an effort to trace the soaring flight of a mind that now reaches us only through fragments. The mystery of Antikythera transcends the physical artifact. It is also the mystery of how knowledge is born, grows, is forgotten, and is reborn. Was there a whole tradition of such devices in antiquity, invisible to us because history has mercilessly erased it? Or was this mechanism a solitary spark, the exceptional fruit of a nameless genius who, for an instant, raced ahead of the human story? In any case, the mechanism forces us to rethink our assumptions about history. It teaches us that progress is not linear, that civilizations leap forward and then falter, that vast stores of knowledge can be forgotten, and that oblivion can shape our destiny as profoundly as discovery. Perhaps, if not for the collapse of Rome, the destruction of Alexandria, and the turmoil that devoured the memory of the ancient world, our technological journey might have unfolded very differently. To contemplate the Antikythera mechanism today, preserved in a museum in Athens, is to gaze through a shattered mirror, catching glimpses of a path that might have been. Each one of its gears seems to whisper of possibilities lost, of a civilization that might have traveled faster to the stars, faster toward itself. It is no coincidence that its discovery, like so many transformative revelations, was born of accident, of the whim of the sea. As if the universe itself, aware of how much we had forgotten, chose to return, in a corroded casing of bronze, the memory of what we once dreamed of becoming. The mystery of the Antikythera mechanism lies not only in its astounding complexity but in its ability to move us even now, centuries later, with its silent invitation never to underestimate the ingenuity of those who came before, and to remember that at the heart of every true advancement beats the same ancient impulse: the insatiable curiosity to understand our place in the cosmos. The Curse of the Romanovs. For centuries, the name Romanov echoed through the corridors of power as a resonance of grandeur, splendor, and imperial destiny. From 1613, when Mikhail Romanov was crowned Tsar after the chaos of the Time of Troubles, until the tragic dawn of the 20th century, the dynasty solidified its rule over a vast, brutal, and mysterious Russia, an empire of contradictions, where the opulence of palaces coexisted with the crushing misery of millions. Yet woven into the secret fabric of this grandeur, whispered through palace corridors and reflected in the superstitious glances of the people, a shadow grew. The shadow of a curse, a prophecy of blood, betrayal, and death that, sooner or later, would demand its price. Long before the last Tsar fell, there were murmurs that the Romanovs were marked. People spoke of broken promises, ancestral sins left unredeemed, blood oaths sealed in the dark thresholds of history. Some pointed to the brutality with which the dynasty had crushed its enemies, others to the oppression inflicted upon peasants and dissenters. The most superstitious claimed that the curse was cast by the old schismatics persecuted without mercy, or perhaps by the descendants of the boyars humiliated by Peter the Great. A seed of doom that grew silently with each passing generation. The 19th century brought ominous signs. Alexander II, the Tsar who freed the serfs and dreamed of a modern Russia, was assassinated by anarchist bombs on the snowy streets of St. Petersburg, his blood staining the frozen ground, a dark omen. His son, Alexander III, though he ruled with an iron hand, could not banish the specters that haunted the palaces. His sudden death, officially attributed to kidney disease, fueled whispers of a fatal destiny that no earthly power could avert. And then came Nicholas II, the last of his line to wear the imperial crown. A man of sincere devotion but weak character, trapped in a time that demanded bold reforms, not pious gestures. Nicholas loved his family with tender devotion, but he seemed incapable of grasping the seismic forces already shaking the foundations of his empire. The curse, if it existed, found its perfect prey in him. A solitary sovereign, poorly advised, surrounded by intrigues and dark portents. One of the most sinister symbols of this fate was Rasputin, the wandering monk with a penetrating gaze and infamous reputation, whose influence over Tsarina Alexandra was seen by many as the tangible manifestation of evil. Rasputin promised to cure the hemophilia of the heir, Alexei, and in exchange wove a web of power and manipulation that drained the monarchy's credibility. The scandals surrounding his name accelerated the moral and political disintegration of the Romanov regime, fanning rumors of sorcery, corruption, and moral decadence. The year 1917 brought the inevitable collapse. Amid famine, war, and despair, Nicholas abdicated, surrendering not only the throne but the myth, the promise of dynastic immortality. The imperial family was imprisoned, humiliated, reduced to mere prisoners in a Russia that no longer recognized their sacred stature. And on the early morning of July 17, 1918, in the basement of the Ipatov house, the Tsar, the Tsarina, their daughters Olga, Tatiana, Maria, Anastasia, and the young Alexei were executed in cold blood by a Bolshevik firing squad. Centuries of splendor ended in a flurry of bullets and bayonets, in a pool of blood that soaked into the earth without a whisper. Was this brutal end merely the inevitable result of political failures, unresolved social tensions, and the endemic violence of history? Or was it, as many believed, the fulfillment of a long-brewing curse, a debt of suffering finally paid? The figure of Anastasia, the youngest daughter, became a beacon of hope that not everything had been lost. Legends of her miraculous escape, of a life lived in anonymous exile, fed the collective imagination for decades. Every woman who claimed to be the lost Grand Duchess, every blurry photograph, every dubious testimony rekindled the yearning for a surviving remnant of the old world. Modern DNA analyses have definitively closed the chapter, confirming that Anastasia and her entire family perished that night. But the persistence of the myth reveals how deeply rooted is humanity's need to find meaning, hope, redemption even in the face of utter horror. The curse of the Romanovs, if we choose to call it that, did not die with them. Its echoes linger in every failed attempt of Russia to reconcile its identity between tradition and modernity, in every authoritarian revival disguised as stability, in every nostalgic glance gilded with imperial splendor and bloodshed. As if the story of the slain Tsars had etched into the Russian soul a permanent mixture of tragic grandeur and melancholic fatalism. Perhaps the true curse lies not in the spilled blood or the lost throne, but in the inability to close the circle, to forget, to forgive. For the wound of the Romanovs is not only the wound of those who died but of all who, generation after generation, carry the heavy burden of a memory made of cold marble, sacred icons, and restless ghosts. Today, the remains of Nicholas, Alexandria, and their children lie in the Cathedral of Saints Peter and Paul in St. Petersburg, under silent domes where candles tremble in the heavy air of devotion and guilt. There, the story seems to close, and yet it does not. For the past never dies. It transforms, weaving itself into the choices, the desires, the longings of the present. The curse of the Romanov Tsars, if we are to speak of it, lives not in magic or prophecy, but in history itself, in its unyielding lesson that no power, however absolute it may seem, escapes the passage of time. That even the most glorious dynasties, the most powerful empires, the most splendid dreams, vanish like a breath into the vast night of history. And perhaps, in the end, that is not a curse at all but a warning. To never trust in the eternity of power, and to remember always that every crown, every empire, every triumph is but a fleeting moment in the infinite current of time. Crop circles. There are phenomena that, by their very elusive nature, resist being caged within the usual categories of understanding. Among them, few have managed to capture the collective imagination as persistently as crop circles. These enormous geometric figures, often of a disconcerting perfection, that appear overnight in fields of wheat, barley, or corn, have been interpreted over time as messages, warnings, elaborate pranks, or simply unanswered mysteries. It all began, at least in modern records, in the south of England, in the counties of Wiltshire and Hampshire, where the green rolling landscapes, dotted with ancient stones like Stonehenge and Avebury, seemed already predisposed to be the stage for the extraordinary. In the 1970s and 1980s, the first simple circles appeared discreetly, modest in size and execution. But as if an invisible artist had been perfecting their craft, within a few years the formations became increasingly complex. Spirals, fractals, patterns that seemed extracted from pure mathematics or a cosmic vision alien to all human logic. From the beginning, attempts at explanation diverged. Some saw in the circles manifestations of natural phenomena still poorly understood. Wind vortices, microtornadoes capable of selectively flattening plants without harming them. Others, more inclined to wonder, spoke of telluric energies, magnetic vortices, resonances of the earth that found their spontaneous expression in these ephemeral formations. But for many, the perfection of the designs, their impeccable symmetry and sudden appearance pointed to another hypothesis, one that brushed against the limits of imagination, the intervention of non-human intelligences. The idea that extraterrestrial beings might be leaving visual messages written on the living skin of the earth seduced entire generations of dreamers, researchers, and mystics. It was not just the circles themselves, but the feeling that something or someone was trying to communicate in a way that transcended verbal language, speaking directly through ancestral symbols and geometries that resonated with a forgotten part of the human psyche. Of course, confessions of fraud soon appeared. In the 1990s, two British veterans, Doug Bauer and Dave Chorley, claimed to be the creators of many original circles using simple boards and ropes to flatten crops. They showed photographs, conducted public demonstrations, and kindly laughed at popular credulity. For a time it seemed that the mystery had been defused, reduced to an ingenious prank by idle night owls. However, as is often the case with all authentic mysteries, the story resisted dying. Because although many formations were undoubtedly human-made, some even sponsored by advertising brands and others created by artists who see fields as a gigantic ephemeral gallery, not all circles fit into the fraud explanation. Some displayed disconcerting physical anomalies, bent wheat stalks that were not broken, changes in molecular structure of plants, anomalous radiation levels. Some appeared during torrential rains or in darkness without footprints or visible access paths. The phenomenon, far from stagnating, evolved. Formations of hundreds of meters in diameter emerged, incorporating mathematical proportions such as the golden ratio, pi, or complex representations of Fibonacci sequences. Each new circle seemed to further challenge human capabilities, as if an intelligence, whatever its origin, was constantly raising the bar of wonder, forcing us to reconsider the limits of what is possible. Beyond their authorship, crop circles touched a deep chord within the collective unconscious. They spoke, in some way, of the relationship between humanity and the cosmos, of the nostalgia for a time when the signs of heaven and earth were read as sacred messages, when the world was a vast text full of hidden meanings. In an era saturated with words and noise, the circles proposed a different kind of communication. Silent, geometric, vibrant. Some saw them as mandalas of the earth, called to contemplation. Reminders that beauty and mystery are not privileges of temples or museums, but unexpectedly spring from the same field that nourishes our bodies. Others interpreted them as warnings, symbols of an imminent planetary change, signs that superior forces, be they extraterrestrial, spiritual, or natural, were watching us and subtly inviting us to awaken. Today, crop circles continue to appear every summer, primarily in England but also in other corners of the world. Germany, the United States, Japan, Australia. Some are clearly human-made. Others, who can know? Most scientists have chosen to ignore them, considering them a minor phenomenon irrelevant to the grand paradigms of physics or biology. But on the margins of science, in the interstices where certainty blurs, there are those who still look at wheat fields as the ancients looked at stars, seeking not a definitive answer but a better formulated question. Perhaps, ultimately, that is the true lesson of crop circles. They are not packaged solutions. They are not messages with immediate translation. They are not magic recipes for humanity's redemption. Rather, they are reminders of the vastness of the unknown, of reality's infinite capacity to surprise us, and of the humble need to keep alive, in a corner of our hearts, the old, stubborn, insatiable curiosity for mystery. Because as long as those impossible shapes keep appearing on the skin of the earth, as long as someone, whether human or not, continues to draw in the night shapes that no one requested but that everyone can contemplate, there will still be room for wonder. And wonder, at the end of the day, is the raw material for all genuine wisdom. The mystery of numbers and civilizations. In every corner of the ancient world, from the high plateaus of Mesoamerica to the fertile valleys of the Nile and the rugged shores of Greece, numbers emerged not merely as accounting tools, but as bridges between the tangible and the sacred. The most disparate civilizations, separated by oceans and centuries, seemed to intuit that numbers were not human inventions but discoveries, reflections of a deeper, invisible order that underlies the very fabric of existence. It is fascinating to observe how cultures that never had contact with each other arrived at astonishingly similar mathematical conceptions. The Maya, with their veneration of the calendar and the concept of zero. The Egyptians, who built pyramids whose proportions reveal an intuitive grasp of sacred geometry. The Greeks, obsessed with the harmony of proportions, where the golden ratio, that mysterious constant found in the growth of a seashell, as well as in the forms of classical architecture, was already a subject of reflection and wonder. The repetition of numerical patterns, lunar cycles, seasons, perfect proportions, suggests that beyond the accidents of history, there exists a universal grammar inscribed in the very heart of the cosmos. As if civilizations, when looking at the stars or measuring the flow of rivers, were not inventing arbitrary meanings, but deciphering fragments of a deeper truth, of which numbers are only the faintest trace. Sacred geometry, present in the alignments of Egyptian temples, in the labyrinths of Chartres, in Tibetan mandalas, and in the urban layouts of Mayan cities, shows that the ancients did not regard mathematics as a cold science, but as an active communion with divine order. The spiral, the circle, the equilateral triangle were not merely useful forms. They were living representations of cosmic balance, of the eternal dance between chaos and harmony. The number 3, a symbol of wholeness across countless cultures, heaven, earth, and underworld, birth, life, and death, past, present, and future. The number 7, associated with sacred cycles, visible planets, musical notes. The number 12, reflected in the months of the year, the signs of the zodiac, the juries of justice. All of them speak of a mysterious convergence, of a shared intuition that numbers are not mere quantities but profound qualities of being. When we observe the pyramids of Giza, their sides almost perfectly aligned with the cardinal points, their proportions resonating with the constant pi, it is difficult not to wonder how the Egyptians, with rudimentary tools and no modern technology, achieved such perfection. Was it mere chance, a sum of trial and error? Or was it rather the product of a lost knowledge, of an ancient science that saw construction not merely as a material act, but as a ritual reproduction of the cosmos? Similarly, at Teotihuacan, the city where men become gods, the distances between pyramids, the alignment of avenues, and the proportions of temples reflect a mathematical sophistication that continues to astound modern scholars. There, as in Giza, as in Angkor, as in Stonehenge, the same suspicion pulses, that ancient civilizations knew more than we usually attribute to them, that their understanding of the universe was both intuitive and precise, mystical and rigorous. The mystery deepens when we realize that the same numbers and proportions governing the growth of plants, the structure of crystals, the rhythms of the human heart, also appear in these monumental works. As if art, architecture, music and nature were born from a common mathematical root, a silent melody that the sages of the past were able to hear and to capture in stone, in song, in ritual. Some modern researchers have ventured bold theories that a mother culture, a forgotten civilization, once transmitted these fundamental knowledge systems to later peoples. Others suggest that the human brain, when faced with the same vital challenges, naturally discovers similar patterns without the need for direct contact. Whatever the truth may be, it is clear that numbers unite humanity beyond language, race, and belief. The golden ratio, that 1.618, found in the arrangement of leaves, in the spirals of shells, in the proportions of the human face, the Fibonacci sequence, the mystery of prime numbers, all are part of a tapestry that we are only beginning to unravel. Are numbers, as the Pythagoreans believed, the ultimate substance of reality? Is the universe a mathematical symphony, a subtle architecture of frequencies and invisible relationships? Perhaps there is no definitive answer. Perhaps, like the ancients, we can only stand in awe before the evidence that the same formulas describing the spin of a galaxy govern the growth of a flower. And perhaps that is enough, to know that at the heart of all multiplicity, a unity pulses, a silent music that invites us, as in ancient temples and forgotten chants, to remember that we are part of something greater. The mystery of numbers and civilizations is ultimately the mystery of ourselves, of our ability to recognize beauty in order, to glimpse the infinite within the finite, to build bridges between reason and wonder. And perhaps this is the greatest lesson the sages of the past have left us, engraved in figures that travel across the centuries like whispers, that knowing the world is, at its core, an act of love. And so, between myths, enigmas, and unanswered questions, we close this journey through the great mysteries of humanity. If any story surprised you, intrigued you, or simply made you dream, I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Which tale made you wonder the most? Your voice is also part of this adventure. See you in the next chapter of the Unexplained.